During our time away, we spent a little bit of time in Missouri. We also spent some time down in Florida. Went down, visited Orlando. We spent some time with a couple of our best friends down there and had a good time. Mickey and Minnie is who I'm talking about there, a couple of our best friends. Some of you know we have a love relationship with Disney World, and so we had a great time visiting the Magic Kingdom and the happiest place on earth down there. But we also, many of you know, we used to live there before we moved here. And went down a little bit of memory lane at different times. Went by our old house that we lived at. Actually ran into some of our neighbors we hadn't seen in a few years. It was just a kind of a sweet moment, a sweet little reunion with them. And when you do that kind of a thing and you revisit where you've been before, revisit an old place, you start reminiscing about funny things that you've experienced as a family. My goodness, there's a lot of funny things we've experienced in our family. We're crazy. But one of them, and it seems like I'm often the punchline of it, and I haven't figured out how to move that around very well yet, but one of them that I was reminded of when we went by our old house was a time on a Wednesday morning. I was on staff at a church down there. On a Wednesday morning, I was supposed to drive back to the office for an elders meeting, 6 a.m. elders meeting. And we lived about 35 minutes away or so, even without traffic at that time in the morning, still over a half-hour drive. So you're getting up 4:45 in the morning, showering, doing everything you can to wake up. I knew I had to get up a few minutes early because I had to get fuel on the way, stop at a gas station because the tank was low. About halfway between, fortunately, I find a gas station. I'm about 20 minutes from the house already, heading that way, pumping gas into the car at the gas tank, and I look down. I have absolutely no shoes on. I am standing at a gas station pump, heading to an elders, pastors, leadership of the church meeting at 6 a.m. that I'm supposed to be at in about 25 minutes, and I have no shoes on. And I'm like, man, there are things you need to remember. And how do you make it all the way into the garage, to the car, to the gas station before you finally wake up enough? That scares me for what I had driven the last 20 minutes. I didn't remember any of that either. So that's the way it is that early in the morning, right? You might be wondering, Jeff, did you go to the meeting? Nope. To this day, I don't think they know why I didn't show up to that meeting. I turned around, went home. There was no way I was showing up without shoes on. That was important, right? But it reminded me of another funny story. I literally just heard this recently. I think it's a true story. There was a family who was checking in at the airport at the front counter. We just did this, flying to Orlando and back. They're checking in, big family, mom and dad, bunch of kids, 16 suitcases they've got to check in. So they're up at the counter. There's just a train, a lineup. Wife's at the counter, husband's at the counter, 16 doing the count, and she stops. She's like, starts to laugh. She said, man, I really wish we would have brought the piano. And the husband's like, are you crazy? What are you even talking about? We got all this, ha. And she says, no. Because the plane tickets are sitting on top of the piano. And so here they are at the counter, and the most important thing that they need, they've forgotten. Isn't it frustrating in our life how easy it is for us to forget things? We are prone, in fact, to forgetfulness. Whether it's remembering names, remembering addresses, cramming for a test, doing all we can to remember formulas and answers for an exam the next day if you're a student or if you're going through certification process, only to forget it in the moment that you need it. Forgetting your shoes. All the things that we forget in life over and over, and the unfortunate news is our spiritual life is not exempt to this reality. In our spiritual walk, there are often times that we forget some of the most essential core things that shape up what our journey and our experience with God can be. I grew up in a more traditional setting of a church. I know some of you did as well. We sang hymns a lot. I love old hymns. There's rich language, rich teaching, rich theology in them. And there's an old hymn called Come Thou Fount. How many of you have ever heard that song? Essentially, yeah, a good half or more probably. That's true in the first service as well. Come Thou Fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing your praise. And there's a haunting lyric further in the song, Come Thou Fount, and it says this, it says, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh please take and seal it for your courts above. It's those lines of prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Now listen, we come in and we gather frequently, we pray. If God is who we believe he is, and he is, and we have experienced all that he is, his character, who he is, what he's done, he's changed us, he's changing us still. If we've experienced that, how could we ever be prone to wander? How could we ever be prone to leave the God we love? I believe the answer is we are prone to forget. We're prone to forget. We're prone to forget what we've experienced in him and just how amazing and how good and great our God really is. And so today, as we're launching into the series about sharing what we found, again, the question, what have you found? We're going to actually change it just a little bit today, and instead of talking about sharing what we've found, and that's what the value is and what our series will be, we're going to talk about sharing who we've found. Because when we are reminded of who we found, it will be absolutely easy. It will be absolutely normal for us to share what we have found. David in the Old Testament has written many of the Psalms, and today we're going to look at one of the Psalms he wrote, and it's a psalm is basically just a song, a declaration of worship and praise and adoration to God. If you have a Bible, Psalm 145 is where we're going to be this morning. Online, the verses will be available if you got a Bible at home. Hey, I want to encourage you, if you don't have the Bible app loaded onto your phone, it's just do a search in whatever platform you use, the Bible. And it's a free platform, amazing. And you can drop that in, you can track along with us or do reading plans throughout the week. But in Psalm 145, the heading will even say on there that this is a psalm of praise from David. Yeah, that David, the David who's a man after God's own heart, who has unbelievable stories that even if you're not familiar with church or you're not really a student of the scriptures normally, you probably know some of his stories. And some of the things that he experienced were so difficult, so challenging, so isolating, so frightening in his life. And what he experienced with God, in spite of that, he had to declare. So over and over in Psalms, you see this, him praising God in the middle of storms, praising God in spite of challenges that he had faced. Psalm 145, you're, of course, reading it now in an English translation of it. And you won't see this in the English translation, but if you read it in the original, the Hebrew that David would have scribed this in, if you were reading a Hebrew translation right now, what you would see, which is fascinating, is every single verse in its order begins with the first letter, the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Every verse in order, R, A, B, C, D, E, it just goes down. Every verse intentionally. You know, what's such intentionality? Why? Because David just put so much thought, so present in God's presence. He just wanted to record just how much he had experienced because of who God was. This is the intentionality of this psalm. And it's a personal psalm. You'll see that in some of the language in here. So I want to read through this. And what we want to do is we want to allow David to guide us as we're talking about being people, being a church, being a people that is centered on Jesus. And as a result of that, we want to share what we have found in him. Let's talk about, instead of sharing what we found, who have we found? What have we found in Jesus? And this is what David would respond. And there's some thoughts we'll have as we go through together in Psalm 145. Look at verse 1. I will exalt you. Look at the personal pronoun. My God, the King. I will exalt you, my God, the King. I will praise your name forever and ever. Every day I will praise you, and I will extol or lift your name forever and ever. Yesterday, our family went up to Thornton on the north side of Denver. One of my nieces, Gracie, had her 13th birthday. So, Gracie, if you're on here, happy birthday again. We got to celebrate her birthday yesterday and had such a good time with them. As we were getting near their house, there's a gas station. I got another gas station story on the same Sunday. But we were nearing the gas station, wanted to get Slurpees for everybody, get drinks for everybody before we go over there. So we're in there getting it. They had a special going. And I asked Lauren, I said, hey, you want to get the real big one? You know, she's like, oh, no. I'm on a diet right now, at least for the next hour. And I just marveled at her commitment. That's my kind of diet, right? An hour-long commitment. I think I can do that one with completion, gold standard on that, right? And you think about what David just said here, day after day, every day, I will praise you. This is not an hour-long commitment. This is not an emotional response from David. He has been so impacted, so transformed by knowing who God is, by experiencing him. Every day, I will share who you are and I will praise you. Look at verse 3. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. His greatness, no one can fathom. That word fathom, interesting word, and it really carries something a little bit deeper. Fathom means you can't quantify it, you can't measure it. It's like trying to probe or explore the deepest parts of the universe, the expanse of the universe. If you were here a few weeks ago, Pastor Kirk was talking about God being revealed and explaining just in massive statistics and numbers and beauty, the awe and the wonder of our universe. Okay, take that a step further. Our God made that. Try to describe who he is. And what David is trying to tell us here, nobody can fathom who you are. David is saying, when I remember who I've found, when I remember who I found in God, everything else looks small. When I remember what I found and when I remember who I have found in God, everything else by comparison looks small. You can't even measure it. You can't quantify. You can't fathom. You're going to be way off no matter what. Earlier this week, we were in my office just getting settled back in and cranking. While we were gone, man, there's some great guys in the church and a couple on staff that redid the flooring in my office and moving it all around. It looks so cool. It's all set up, and I love being able to have that for meetings and inviting people in there and all that time. But part of it was moving my bookshelves from one wall to a different wall. And as a result, of course, pictures all move around, trying to figure out where everything's going to land. And so I'm like, well, let's figure out the measurement on this. Tape measure, no. Ruler, no. Yardstick, no. We got nothing to measure anything. I'm trying to figure out how do we. Leslie's like, well, let's just use Garrett's shoe. So it's a great idea. Pull off Garrett's shoe, and it's like, okay, one shoe, and just trying to figure out. It probably will not surprise you, but by the time this was over, we were a few inches off. We had the wrong tool. There was no way we could get the accuracy because we just didn't have the tool to get the accurate expression of what we were looking at. Think about God. We can't accurately describe who he is. We don't have the right tools. We don't have the ability to describe the awe and the wonder of who he is, of what he's done, of what he continues to do in our world and our lives. David takes a stab at it, though. Everything else looks small compared to him when I remember who God is. And he starts to try to explain. Look what he says in the next verse, verse 4. One generation will commend or will tell your works to another. They'll talk about your mighty acts. They'll speak of your glorious splendor, of your majesty. I'll meditate and reflect on your wonderful works. They'll tell of the power of your awesome works, and I will proclaim your great deeds. They celebrate your abundant goodness, and they joyfully sing of your righteousness. Did you happen to notice going through that there's a sense of redundancy to that? Didn't it seem like he's kind of repeating himself? I think that's by design. I don't think David can find the words. Verse 3, nobody can fathom. I can't find the words to describe who I found, who leads me, who is in me, who guides me. When I remember who I have found, everything else just seems really small. No matter how big and monumental it may have just felt a few minutes ago, when I remember who Jesus is, what God has done in my life, everything else looks small. Continue on. Look at what verse 13 says. Verse 13 tells us, your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures through all generations. The Lord is trustworthy in all of his promises, and he is faithful in all he does. What's the next thought David gives us? It's this: when I remember who I found, I look past the temporary, and I focus on the eternal. Your kingdom is forever. Your domain, your reign, it spans generations. There's not a heartbeat or a breath that's been experienced on earth that God has not been present during. I get so distracted. I know you do too sometimes. We all do. I get so distracted by the temporary, don't you? Hey, we've been gone for a little period of time, a little rest time. You didn't solve anything while I was gone. The world is still burning, right? Right? I mean, come on, I figured you guys are going to get this all figured out while I was gone, so we could come back and, no, I think everything's even worse than it was a few weeks ago, right? It just seems like it compounds and compounds, and the challenges and the circumstances around us, the chaos, the division, the polarity everywhere. And then the stuff that's in me, all that ugly stuff that I don't want to have, I don't even want to talk about, but it's there, and the guilt and the shame, all of the circumstances around it, all the chaos that can be in us. We get so focused on that. I think David's just like, it's there. David, who had an ugly, very public, very costly affair. David, who had some of his best guys put on the front line and killed so he could have that affair. That David steps back and says, look at my brokenness, my ugly, but let me step back. When I see God, I come off the temporary and I'm refocused on the eternal. His kingdom is above anything I've ever done. His grace supersedes that. His forgiveness never runs out. Every generation has tasted of it, and yet it's no less than it always has been. God is eternal, and all that is temporary begins to drift away when we remember who we have found. You know, so many voices that are trying to speak into your life today. You realize that? I feel like we got to keep reminding ourselves of that, maybe on a regular basis. There are voices with agendas, with answers, with misdirection, with misinformation that are trying to steer you all the time. And some of you right now might be internally even nodding, and you're not even realizing that the ones that you are, because no, I don't want to listen, yeah, but the ones that you are listening are doing the same thing too. I mean, it's just, there's more voices trying to steer and guide and manipulate our thoughts, our steps, our directions, our spending, our voting, our rights, or whatever it is right now, that it's really hard to find truth in the middle of that. So can I encourage you, what you need to do? You need to turn that station to a whole nother, or turn that dial to a whole nother station. You need to dial in on WGOD. All God, all the time. Man, get rid of those other stations and dial in on that voice. All God, all the time. The one voice who has been there since the beginning of time and who can see above and see through and see beyond all that we're experiencing. Because everything we're experiencing and arguing about right now, it's going to fade, or it's not going to be on the front page next week, right? Or next month. Something else is going to take its place, something more catastrophic, something more, wow, awe-inspiring, something more that will sell and get you to spend or buy or engage with or do whatever. That's all temporary. Move past that. Don't get caught in that trap. It's one of the greatest ploys of the enemy. Step back, WGOD, all God, all the time. Listen to the voice that lifts your head, lifts your eyes, and causes you to see, I've got this. I am the eternal one. I've been in control since the beginning. Yeah, it's pretty chaos. Yeah, it's hard. I'm not diminishing or belittling the hard stuff that so many go through. I'm not saying that at all. David went through it too. And he can step back and say, man, your kingdom is forever. Every generation has seen your faithfulness. The temporary melts away when I continue to remember him and I focus on who I have, the eternal one. David continues in the next verse. He says this in verse 14, the Lord upholds all who fall, and he lifts up all who are bowed down. That idea of bowed down is somebody who's ready to just give up. Ready to just, I'm bowed down, I'm defeated, I'm done. Let me ask you a quick question. This last 15, maybe almost 18 months now, it has been unbelievable. Early on, I remember last summer when people were using terms like unprecedented, I'm like, oh, brother. You know, we're kind of walking through, every generation feels like, I think now that we can look back and say, yeah, this is kind of unprecedented. The mesh, the perfect storm of so much chaos, so much unknown, so much politicizing of positions, so much we don't know right, wrong, up, down, should we, shouldn't we, on. And it feels like, again, and you're watching what I watch, another wave coming through. It's been so challenging. I'm going to ask you just real honestly, maybe raise your hand with me, and mine will be very high in this. Has there been a time in the last 15, maybe 18 months where you felt like just throwing in the towel, I'm ready to be done? Anybody? Please, somebody raise their hand, because I feel like I'm the only one doing this now. About a third of you, the rest of you are liars. I love you in Jesus, but no, I'm just kidding. Then you're stronger than me. There's more times than I can count in this last year that I'm just like, I don't know, man. That next curve ahead, I don't know how we're going to navigate this. Oh, man, here it comes again. It's been so hard, and yet here's this promise that David found true in his life, that when he remembered who he had found that there is a God who is eternal, and he's above all these things, and he's very present. The Lord upholds all who falls and lifts all who are bowed down. Those who are about to quit or throw in the towel, he lifts. He's present with you there. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food. You provide at the proper time. You open your hand. You satisfy the desires, the true desires of our hearts. The Lord is righteous in all his ways. He's faithful in all he does, the character of who he is. Verse 18, the Lord is near to all who call on him, in truth. He fulfills the desires of those who fear him. That sounds a lot like someone who's determined, I'm going to live a Jesus-centered life. Oh, he's here. He's following with you. He's present with you. He fulfills the desires of those who fear him and follow him. And he hears their cries when they're ready to throw in the towel, when the reports are coming back wrong, when the relationship seems beyond repair, when the loneliness feels too much to carry, whatever your story, whatever's happening, he hears the cry and he saves them. This is who David found. Next thought he gives us here is, when I'm remembering who I found, I recognize a God who is present. God who is present and a God who provides. We just read in there, he provides food just when we need it. He provides salvation. He saves us. He provides his ear and he hears our cry. He collects our tears. He's there. He's present. a God who is present and a God who provides. So pause here. It's interesting. As I was thinking through this passage and this section in particular and reading, I kind of flipped the script. We're talking about what David found, and what I hope your story is that you have found God to be in your life. A powerful presence, providing God. Yes. Flip that a little bit. What did he find when he found you? The scripture actually just answered it for us, didn't it? What did he find when he found me? Did he find somebody broken that he needed to make new? Yeah. Did he find somebody lost that needed to be found? Somebody alone, and he provided family and a seat at the table? Somebody without hope, and he provides hope eternal? Somebody who was dead. That's what Jesus does. Somebody who was dead, and he brought you back to life. This is what he's done when he found you. I want to read those verses again, verses 14 through 19, just real quick. You might just listen and receive this. If you'll give me the freedom, I just want to kind of personalize it just a little bit. And not just read it as if you were saying this. Can you identify with this? Look what he says. A personal, present, providing God. The Lord upholds me when I fall. He lifts me up when I'm bowed down, I'm about to quit. The eyes of all my eyes look to you, and you give me my food, my provision at the proper time. You open your hand, and you satisfy the desires of my heart when we remember who we found. You are righteous in all your ways. You are faithful in all you do. You are near me when I call on you, when I call on you in truth. Verse 19, you fulfill the desires of my heart when I fear you, when I center on you, and you hear my cries, and you save me. That's what God found when he found me. All of that, all that brokenness, all that death, all that decay, all that rottenness, all that pride. And he sets me free. That's the words we read earlier that you wrote on the cards. What he found, he flips upside down because of who he is, his power and his presence and his provision. With God, sometimes we'll say something like this, that with God, nothing's too big, right? I mean, you either heard that or you've probably said that at some time in your life. There's nothing too big for God, right? Can I just add this? There's also nothing too small for God. I think sometimes, our faith, we want to take those leaps and bounds. Man, God can move the mountains. God can also move the pebbles in your shoe that are causing a significant amount of discomfort right now. Don't think that what you're walking through, it's probably too small to bother him. Oh, no. Cast all your cares on him. He loves you. He cares for you. Nothing's too small. You're not too small. There's people in the hospital who are dealing with, or that family, yeah, but you're dealing with this. And as David would tell you, what we have found is there is a present and providing God who cares about all your needs. The New Testament church got this. Paul writes in Philippians 4, my God will meet all of your needs, big, small, public, private, things that have been done to you, failures you've made on your own. God can meet all those needs. He can repair what's broken. He can give life to what's dead. He can do that according to his riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. We find, when we remember who we find a God who is present and a God who provides. What's the natural response to all this? David gives us the answer. Look at verse 21. My mouth will speak in praise of you, Lord. Let every creature, let's go to everything. Let every creature praise his holy name forever and ever. He gives a universal mission statement. The purpose of everything that has breath, everything that exists, every rock that can't move, every bird that can sing, every heart that beats. Let it give praise to the one that we have found and all that we have found in him. David is telling us this. When I remember who I found, I will share who I found. I can't help but not speak and declare on your behalf. When I remember who I found, I'll share who I found. It's an overflowing. I've been filled to the brim, and I can't help but want to spill it over and let others know what freedom looks like and what life looks like and what hope can look like. In the verse there, my mouth will speak in praise. Verse 21 that we just read, that word speak, you might think, I can get off the hook on this one. I can be walking around by myself in the basement and speaking praise to God. You can, and you should, but that's not what David's saying there. This word speak is also translated in other places as tell, or it's a declarative statement with, get this, with the intent of others being informed. So when I'm speaking, it's not just for myself down in my basement or in the shower in the morning, I'm praising you or whatever it is. It's for the benefit of others, David says. and making these declarative statements of praise to God. I will speak on your behalf. I will sing of all these mighty acts, these wonders, who you are, what you've done in my life, all the majesty beyond what we can fathom. So here's how he does it. Here's what we do. We won't take the time to do this morning, but I want to challenge you to. I want to encourage you sometime this week, make a note of it, make a reminder. Psalm 146, we're in Psalm 145, Psalm 146 through 150. It's the last 5 Psalms. They're so short, few verses each. But sometime during this week, maybe just one a day. It'll take you a minute a day to read Psalm 146, 7, 8, 9, and 50. Psalm 150, right on the end there. In these 5 Psalms, they're actually called the Hallel Psalms. In Hebrew, the word Hallel means praise. You'll see, get this, I'll give you a little teaser. 46 times in those 5 Psalms, you will see the word praise. Or again, in the Hebrew, it's Hallel. Over and over. Each one of those Psalms begins with praise the Lord. Each one of those Psalms ends with praise the Lord. I think David was a little bit more committed than an hour-long diet. Every day of his life, every breath that he has, he wants every speck of creation to praise the Lord. And he goes on and says why? Because of who he is, because of the mighty works he has done, because of the way he's provided, protected, delivered, the awe that we have. Man, just be encouraged. Read those this week. And again, they're called the Hallel Psalms. And over, they would read these Hallel Psalms on their pilgrimages to Jerusalem to worship on the way back. They would read them before dinner. They would read them after dinner. They would read them when they were doing festivals, in the temple during sacrifices, on and on. Hallel Psalms, which tells you sometimes, again, Hallel means praise. Sometimes we just need to sing for the Hallel of it. Okay? Friends, it's Bible. They sang for the Hallel of it, for the praise of it. And over, and they're coming and going. And who would hear this as a result? I mean, these Psalms are everywhere. There's other Hallel Psalms also. There's called the Egyptian Hallel songs in the middle of Psalms. There's some other ones as well. But who would hear these when they would recite them constantly, day after day? Their children would. Their grandchildren would. Families would. People in the houses and buildings that they would go through, everybody would hear these all the time. When they would have their pilgrimage to Israel, other villages and cities and passerbys would hear this constant praise, Hallels to our God, over and over. And they would be reminded that this group of people, they have found someone that they have to share. They're just sharing it everywhere they go. Their neighbors, their enemies would hear it, and they would fear. On and on. And you know who else hears? You and me. From generation to generation. In fact, that's what he says back in verse 4. Psalm 145, verse 4. One generation commends your works to another. And they tell of your mighty acts through these praises, these hallels. Verse 12, there's a purpose. So that all people may know. We sing these praises not in our basement and in the shower. Do that, yeah, but not just that. We sing them abroad, publicly, online, on any platform, in any hallway, mowing the grass, getting the mail, talking to someone who is down and who is about to throw the towel in, talking to another student in the desk next to you, or somebody else that you have lunch with, a colleague at work. We share these hallels, these praises over and over. Why? So that all will know your mighty acts and your glorious splendor of your kingdom. They're so lost and caught in the temporary. You and I can be part of lifting their gaze and seeing the eternal, the kingdom of God. I hope you'll take this. I don't know if you write this down or if this will just plant a seed for you, but here's the challenge. There is a next generation of believers, I believe, that doesn't even exist yet. You ever think about that? They live near you. Every night there's people 20, 30, maybe 40 yards to your left, to your right, to behind you, whatever your plot is in your neighborhood or your apartment complex. There are people all around you that are the next generation of Christians, next generations of Jesus followers, and they don't even exist yet, and they're just waiting. They might just be waiting on you to share who you have found and to share what you have found. And the kicker is this: when we remember who we found, it is no problem at all sharing what we found. When you remember where you were, David would say in another psalm that he took me out of the messy, miry clay and he set my feet on the rock. I was dead. I had nothing, and he's given me life. When you remember who Jesus is, And when you remember what you found in God, it's no problem sharing what you found. I think we just fall into the trap of, come thou fount. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Why? Because I think we forget. And we have a tendency to forget the most important things. That's why here at Mosaic, one of our core values, and let me read the language for you, and we'll look at this each week. One of our core values is to share what we've found. And we'll throw that on the big screen here for you. Life, joy, purpose, hope, we have found it all in Jesus. You wrote some of those very words on those cards. And even if you didn't write it, maybe you would say, yeah, I've experienced that as well. Life, joy, hope, peace. We have found our purpose. We have found it all in Jesus. And we have got to share it. So we run to our friends and we remove every barrier that we possibly can. Why? Because that's what Jesus did for us. Just like Jesus did for you and just poured out all for you. That's why we give at Mosaic and we challenge ourselves to give sacrificially, to give generously. Why? Because we want to remove every barrier we can, just like Jesus did. He did that for us. That's why we serve regularly and faithfully. Why? Because he did that he gave everything for me. Why would I not do the same to try to share as much as I can? That's why we verbally share a verbal witness of verbal faith. Share what we found. Why? Because Jesus did that for me. He taught me how to live. He taught me where hope could be found. He taught me where freedom could be found. He taught me what it meant to live in the favor of God and in the freedom of God. Why would I not, when I remember all that, I can't help but want to tell others about that, right? I don't know if that means somebody agreed or disagreed. I'm just going to leave that one there. Last thought for you, and then we're going to sing out this morning. Every time I get a chance to do this, I love to sit down and have a lunch or a meeting or something with a man named Scott Rideout. Some of you will know his name. Scott is the president of Converge. We are part of this network of churches. It's one of the affiliations that we're part of. I want to say it's like 4,000 or something like that, churches across the globe that are just like we are here. We're passionate about Jesus. We're passionate about people coming to freedom in him and life in him. We're passionate about multiplying and giving ourselves, giving generously, all that. 4,000 plus churches around the globe that we're networked with like that, and Scott's the president of that. Scott, his office is in Orlando, so while we were down there, I grabbed breakfast with him a couple weeks ago. He's preached here. He's met with our staff. He's a big prayer and encouragement to Mosaic, and I'm so grateful for him. And I was with him at Cracker Barrel, south side of Orlando, having breakfast about 2-3 weeks ago, talking about what's happening here. Every time I'm with him, I'm like, I'm buying you breakfast, I'm buying you lunch. I want to pepper him with questions. I want to ask ideas. He wants to ask how we're doing. He watches us online. He encourages, texts me now and then, ideas, prayers, on and on. Such an encouragement. And we're sitting at breakfast, and this is the second time he's done it, but this is the most serious he's been about it. And he's like, hey, can I say something? I'm watching Mosaic. I'm watching what God's done at the church there over the last few years. Jeff, there is a culture and there is a belief in that body of people that is ready to be reproduced. That is like spiking the football in the end zone to me. That is like lifting the Lombardi trophy for non-football fans, Super Bowl trophy for me. That is what we want. We want to be that group of people that will share what we found. And now we've got a culture and belief. We can't believe we get to be a part of his story. We are so centered on who Jesus is. He's not just talking about me on the platform. He's talking about you. He's preached here. He's going to try to be here this fall, if not this spring again, to preach. Amazing leader. He sees churches everywhere. The belief and the culture at this place right here. He's talking about you. He's talking about you. The belief and the culture is ready to be reproduced. So it's time, church, to lean in and share what you have found. Share who you have found. To declare it loudly like David, not just for an hour, every day, everywhere, every chance we get to share who and what we found. We have found the abundant life. We have found a joy that cannot be quenched. We have found purpose to our life. We have discovered what we were built for and who we're supposed to center ourselves on, what voice we're supposed to listen to. We have found a hope that is eternal and unquenchable. And if that is true, and you will hold on to that, don't drift. Lean in and share what you have found.